Smash that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and like the video. Check us out on YouTube at Idaho Farm Boy. See you there.
We make our money by selling and discovering new drugs. And that is a super scalable business model.
This is a Farm Boys podcast with Enhanced Games founder, Dr. Aron D'Souza.
So my name is Dr. Aron D'Souza. I'm the president and founder of the Enhanced Games. I have a PhD in intellectual property law and a law degree from Oxford University. After Oxford, I led Peter Thiel's litigation against Gawker Media involving the wrestler Hulk Hogan, where we won on the largest invasion of privacy judgments in history. After that, I built and sold 3 companies, but today I dedicate myself 100% to Enhance because I believe this is the greatest contribution we can make to humanity.
Awesome. Well, thanks for jumping on here, Dr. Aron. So, first question for you. Can you articulate your philosophy on human enhancement and why you think society should embrace enhanced athletes?
I think society should not just embrace enhanced athletes, but we should embrace enhanced humans, period. Right now, I fundamentally believe that we all have the right of sovereignty over our own bodies. So an adult with free and informed consent should be able to do to their body what they wish. I think this is actually the most fundamental of human rights. And presently, the sporting system is against any kind of bodily autonomy. And we have really embraced the future. We have seen how technology has advanced the human species in very much every aspect of life, from agriculture to the smartphone. But for some reason, we have not allowed technology to enhance sporting performance, which is the core instantiation of human performance. And I think in 50 years' time, we will look back upon the Enhanced Games and this era of humanity as catalyzing a very important technological revolution. When 50%, or 1 out of 4, 25% of Americans will eventually use a GLP-1 drug, and 83% of that time it's prescribed not for diabetes, but for image enhancement purposes. We live in a world where it's going to become increasingly common to use enhancements. And what the Enhanced Games will do is break world records, which will then sell lots of existing pharmaceutical compounds, which in turn will drive billions of dollars in new revenue, which will increase the incentive for research and development, which will mean better drugs, which mean more world records, which mean more drug sales. And one point I always like to sort of point out is that healthcare extracts all of the profits of capitalism. So in 1950, 6% of the US GDP was spent on healthcare. Today it's 18%. But the US GDP has come up by like a factor of 5 in that same period. So healthcare now costs something like 15 times as much as it did in the 1950s. And why is that? Is because we have an infinite willingness to pay to enhance our lifestyle, right? So no matter how much money you make and no matter what you do in life, when you have extra money, particularly towards the end of your life, you're willing to spend almost anything to improve your quality of life. And I think the sector of human enhancement is already measured in the trillions of dollars with drugs like Ozempic, but it's going to be measured in like percentage points of GDP in the future.
So you talk about new technologies. So what do you have any specific technologies or scientific advancements that you would say excite you the most in terms of enhancing human athletic potential or I guess our lives?
Yeah, so there are 3 classes of drugs that are the most effective presently in enhancing human performance. And these are anabolic steroids, synthetic growth hormones like testosterone, and EPO. All 3 of these compounds are very well known. They've been around for north of 100 years. And even the 1939 Nobel Prize was awarded for the synthesis of testosterone. The problem is that in the last 40 years, the scientific funding bodies like the NIH or the Wellcome Trust in the UK have not funded any basic science research into this category of performance medicine. And so the massive advancements we've seen in drug discovery in the last 2 generations have not been applied to the question of performance medicine. And these advancements are things like synthetic biology, artificial intelligence, computational biology, etc. And so I believe in the next few years, we're going to see huge advancements in human performance drugs because biotechnology companies can use all these tools that have been developed for everything from oncology to HIV now to apply it for the question of performance medicine, for which there is very good evidence and state-of-the-art drugs that presently are in market.
So what kind of response have you gotten from traditional sports bodies or regulatory agencies or just even the public?
Well, let's break that down. So from the public, we've had an immensely positive response. There's great interest to see what human beings can do. From regulatory bodies, particularly medical regulators, we see a great interest in this field because of the potential to impact not just individual human performance, but imagine the performance of the whole nation. If America could be faster and stronger and healthier, well, that's going to have a measurable impact on GDP. Now, the legacy sporting organizations respond to us just like the taxi cabs did to Uber. They say, oh, this is illegal, this is unsafe, this is farcical. Why? Because they have $100 billion monopoly that they've held on to through corruption for a generation now, for 2 generations, 3 generations even. And so their response is, of course, deeply predictable and reflects, this tired old monopolies that are struggling to hold on to the relevance that they once had in the world.
So getting into the competition and the sport of it, how do you plan to address the fairness when enhancements can vary widely between all these athletes?
Well, that's the beauty of it. So the Enhanced Games is not like the Olympics or what the Olympics intends to be, which is the ultimate expression of individual human performance. Okay. The Enhanced Games is like Formula One. Formula One is the combination of the athlete and the engineer working together to make cars safer, faster, and a more exciting entertainment property. And we are the athlete and the scientists working together. So, of course, we hope that scientific innovation will happen and that individual athletes and their doctors may work on innovative new compounds that give them a competitive edge because that's going to create market-based incentives for more and more innovation.
You're obviously a very intelligent man. Where do you specifically draw the line between beneficial enhancement and then when it becomes potentially harmful?
That's a great question. When I first applied to Oxford University more than 20 years ago, my admissions essay was about the right to take risk. And I felt that even 20 years ago, our society was becoming one where we have lost the incentive to take risk. And over the last 2 decades, this problem has gotten worse and worse. And so when the legacy sporting bodies say the Enhanced Games are unsafe or they're going to push boundaries in directions that we feel uncomfortable with, I point to the fact that to go into space today, astronauts have a 1 out of 16 chance of dying. The first climbers of Mount Everest had a 1 out of 10 chance of fatality. Current climbing of Mount Everest has about a 1 in 100 chance of fatality. And so we view space exploration or mountaineering as very noble pursuits that show us the extent of the capability of mankind. That even the most abusive use of performance enhancements do not have a fatality rate that is comparable to mountaineering or skydiving or freediving. And so ultimately, I believe that individuals with free and informed consent have the right to take risk, and that only an individual can set that risk tolerance for themselves. And it's not the place of, any safetyist, protectionist, regulatory body or governing body to make that decision for the individual. We are all entitled to set our own risk thresholds ourselves.
Okay. So are you going to have safeguards or regulations to implement to protect any type of health or well-being?
Yeah. So let's be very clear. The drug testing system that was invented by the International Olympic Committee is not about safety. It is about fairness and competition and the integrity of the competition. And that's the most important driving objective for them. We have designed a safety-based system. And so the major risk of performance enhancement is cardiac. Yet cardiac risk is very knowable, and it becomes increasingly knowable in this modern era because of the advent of things like Bluetooth sensors. Your Apple Watch has a pulse oximeter in it, which is more accurate than technology that was available in a hospital less than 20 years ago. And so real-time health monitoring is an essential component of the safety protocols. And so every athlete, whether they're natural or enhanced, has to pass a full system health checkup before competing at the games. So they need an echocardiogram, they need blood work, they need an MRI. And these tools indicate to us if they have any underlying health risk, particularly cardiac risk.
So you have a lot of haters, I assume, out there. I'm sure there's a lot of support as well, but I'm sure there's more than a handful of haters. How do you respond to those people that argue, well, having enhanced sports undermines the spirit of competition?
I think that criticism. So let's first begin. Where does the idea of the spirit of sport come from? It doesn't come from ancient Greece. This term, the spirit of sport, was invented by a French aristocrat, Baron Pierre de Coubertin, who created the modern Olympic movement in 1896. And his view of the spirit of sport was that amateur sport was the moral touchstone. And so from 1896 until 1992, only amateur athletes were allowed to compete at the Olympic Games because they viewed professional athletes as ungentlemanly, as polluting the integrity and the spirit of sport, as cheating, because they used wealth to get an advantage. And of course, the amateur sports system was designed so that, European Victorian gentlemen aristocrats could have an advantage and keep working class people out of sports. And it's notable that today, the 9th of June, we are having this conversation because the US federal courts just ruled a few hours ago that NCAA student athletes all can be directly paid. So I feel that's the final nail in the coffin of amateurism. And so it's taken less than 30 years for amateur sport to be completely erased off the map of the earth. It literally doesn't exist anymore as a concept. And I think the same is going to be true of the distinction between natural and enhanced sport. So, and the reason is because as viewers, we are only interested in watching the best. No one watches minor league ball. Everyone watches major league ball. No one watches F2. Everyone watches F1. And so who's going to watch the old, slow, natural, amateur Olympics when you can watch the fast, modern, professional, enhanced games? And if you're an athlete, don't you want to go where the money's at?
So it sounds like you're saying that enhanced sports will eventually replace traditional sports entirely.
I think so. Because ultimately, going back to the point that I made earlier, the human enhancements ecosystem will be worth 5 to 10% of GDP, because enhancement will be extractive of all the profits of capitalism. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much money you have, you will pay all of that to be healthier and happier and live longer. And as a consequence, the principal advertising mechanism for human enhancement products will be enhanced sport. And so if natural sport is against enhancement, they're going to lose a very important revenue driver. And the lifetime customer values of sports betting companies like ESPN Sportsbet or FanDuel is about $1,500. And this has been providing the new rivers of gold that is financing American sport today. The lifetime customer value for a human enhancement customer is at least double or triple that. So the total amount of revenue that can be captured by a sporting federation through selling enhancements products is significantly more than gambling or media rights could ever provide.
Wow. So how transparent are athletes going to be regarding the specifics of their enhancements?
Well, that's a great question, because we have seen this play out in real time since our announcement of the first host city of the Enhanced Games 3 weeks ago.
I saw that. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. And at that announcement, we also showed the breaking of the first world record and 2 athletes who competed to break that world record, James Magnuson and Christian Golomev. And they've taken almost very differing views on how they talk about their enhancement protocols. James has been very, very open. He goes on a podcast almost every day talking about his enhancement protocols, and he's gone very viral about that. Christian Golomev has been very private about what his enhancement protocols are. Christian did break the world record himself, so maybe his were slightly better. But what I would say is that athletes have a commercial incentive to be transparent. because they can become spokespeople for these compounds and monetize them. And so ultimately, think of it like Formula One. You want to tell the world what kind of car you're driving, what kind of clutch is in it, or what kind of braking technology, because that is an advertisement for the manufacturers and increases your sponsorship dollars.
So one of the criticisms I'm sure you've heard is about youth athletics. How do you envision enhanced sports impacting youth athletics and what these younger athletes are aspiring to?
So that's a ironic criticism, because that was originally levied at me by the head of the UK anti-doping agency. And one point that I would make is that the largest sponsors of sport in the United Kingdom are gambling and alcohol companies, which are two age-gated industries. And so it's perfectly normal to have endorsements from alcohol and gambling companies, and children in theory are not influenced by them, because they know you can only drink alcohol or gamble over the age of 18 in the UK. And I would say the same is true here, right? Enhancement products are for adults under free and informed consent. And in the same way that alcohol and gambling are. And, the legacy federations like to say the enhanced games are unsafe. They're bad for public health. And my response to that is, well, that is a criticism based on personal anecdotes, not on scientific evidence. And if you actually look at the scientific evidence, anabolic steroids are much safer than alcohol or tobacco. However, the two longest serving sponsors of the Olympics in the United States are Coca-Cola and McDonald's, two organizations which arguably have done more damage to public health than any other entities in the totality of human history. Like, the number of people who have been murdered by Coke and McDonald's can probably be measured in the hundreds of millions. And these are the principal sponsors of Olympic sport.
A lot of people don't think about things like that, do they?
No, and we should think about them much, much more consciously than we do. The processed food industry has done such dramatic damage to public health, yet it's been so normalized through very effective lobbying. And if you read about the history of Coke and McDonald's, they built their brands on the back of sports sponsorship, particularly Olympic sponsorship.
Yeah, NBC, holds the Olympics, and you can always see that Coca-Cola commercial. So and then McDonald's offering fries. I remember a couple years back, or a lot of years back, to
be the official catering partners to the Olympics, right? So Team USA fed by McDonald's, right? It's pernicious, and it is damaging to public health. So the argument that the sports federations levy, that we are bad for public health and they are good for public health, is deeply hypocritical and inconsistent.
So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I've read on you've said you've never used performance-enhancing drugs, right?
So that's an interesting one. So some journalists, when I first started the Enhanced Games 2 years ago, would ask me this question: have you used performance enhancements? And I said, no. But actually, on a deep analysis of the World Anti-Doping Agency's ban list, is that I have. Excuse me.
Yep.
So I suffer from, I'm a CEO, I'm not an athlete. So I don't use the sort of normal performance enhancements, but I suffer from jet lag a lot. And when I get back to my home in London, the first thing I always do is I drop my suitcase off at home and I walk across the street to Harrods, the fancy department store. And I get an IV drip, direct intravenous vitamin injection. And I probably do that once or twice a month, and it's fabulous. Right, it's a great way to get over jet lag. It turns out that an intravenous IV drip is a banned procedure under the World Anti-Doping Code and will get you banned from Olympic competition.
Wow.
Just as an example of how farcical this is. So when people think about performance enhancements, they think about illegal underground drugs that are injected intravenously, not something that you can get at Harrods. And this is, something I've learned more recently. 25% of the goods on the shelf at GNC will get you banned from Olympic competition. 25% in your local GNC. We are not talking about illegal underground black market substances here. These are things you can buy in grocery stores.
My two daughters both played in the NCAA Division I, and some of these things were ridiculous that they had to watch for like Benadryl or just, I don't remember what it was, but it was crazy to even have to think, well, can I take this? I'm sick. They want me to play.
So Benadryl, so pseudoephedrine was a banned substance. The other example I like to give is that creatine, which is now so frequently used that you can buy it at Joe and the Juice, or at Whole Foods, was a banned substance. And when you read about the headlines about creatine in the 1990s when it first came out, the New York Times called it a super steroid that was killing people, and that it was banned by multiple sports federations. It was seen as the new wonder drug. It carried so much risk that it couldn't even be considered worthy of study. And now you can buy it at your local grocery store.
Yeah, I think creatine is very interesting because they talk about how much more beneficial it's for your brain, even over working out. But I do remember that time. What sports are the Enhanced Games going to debut with, and why did you select those specifically?
So the core problem about the Olympic Games is they build a dozen stadiums and they throw them away after 2 weeks. That's how they can generate so much revenue, yet pay the athletes nothing and leave cities and countries bankrupt. And so we focus on sports that we can have low infrastructure and that have high television and social media impacts. So at the first games, we will debut with track, swimming, and weightlifting. And importantly, these are three objective sports that mean that we can objectively prove world records. So going back to the point that I made earlier, no one wants to watch minor league ball. Everyone watches major league ball. No one watches F2. Everyone watches F1. Right. The XFL, despite hundreds of millions of dollars in spending, has never even scratched 1% of the NFL's revenue. And why is that? Because as human beings, we want to see the very best. And so the opportunity for us at the Enhanced Games is, how do we become the ultimate avenue of human competition? We just break all the world records. And that's the beauty of Olympic sport. They're based on very few objective world records. Usain Bolt's 100-meter, the mile, the marathon, the 50 free in the pool. There aren't very many else. We already have the world record in swimming. We just need to break the 100-meter on the track, and then we're the fastest competition in the world. And then suddenly, I don't think NBC is going to pay $3.5 billion to broadcast the Olympics when the announcer is going to be saying, 8 guys are lining up. Who's going to be the fastest natural man in the world? It's not that interesting. And as a consequence, the advertising dollars won't be there. The athletes, no one wants to be the fastest natural man in the world. You just want to be the fastest man in the world, right? And this is the same transition from amateur to professional sports.
Yeah. So you talked about accessibility for fans. So how will we be able to watch the Enhanced Games? Will it be streamed, broadcast? How are you planning on doing that?
So a lot of journalists ask me, they say, oh, have you done a television deal? And then my response to that is, why would I want to do a television deal? Why would I want to be stuck with an old legacy broadcaster that no one watches anymore? I don't sit in front of a television to consume content, and I think most people don't anymore. We've had hundreds and hundreds of millions of people view our content on social media, and so everything we do is social media first, because ultimately we don't make our money by selling television rights and advertising space like the Olympics do. We make our money by selling and discovering new drugs, and that is a super scalable business model. And I believe that we're going to discover the next Ozempic, and that will add $1 trillion to our valuation, which will allow us to host even better sporting events and pay athletes even more money.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Are there any other major athletes from the traditional sports leagues or even the Olympics that have expressed interest to you? And I don't want to ask for any names because I'm assuming that somebody's come to you and be like, yeah, I'm really interested in doing this, but... Well,
the but is pretty limited. So in swimming, the average swimmer, professional Olympic level swimmer, probably earns only about $20,000 or $30,000 a year. And your average Olympian in America only earns $30,000 a year. And so when you think about, there are great swimmers all over the world. There are great runners, particularly in Africa, who are existing on $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a year. And we're saying, you sign with us, it's definitely minimum 6-figure compensation. And then it's well beyond that, in terms of prize money. $1 million for breaking the significant world records, $250,000 for a gold medal. It's the level of compensation that's not available anywhere else in Olympic sport. And so what I always like to say is that the enhanced games aren't the Olympics plus drugs. It's the Olympics plus drugs and money. And I want to make sure that my athletes aren't just well paid, they're the best paid, because they're the finest examples of the human species. Why are they making less money than a banker in New York City? Why should a Premier League football player or an NFL player or an NBA player earn 10 times, 100 times as much as an Olympian? And it's because the Olympics are a broken bureaucratic structure run by a bunch of fossilized old European aristocrats who have designed a system to benefit the bureaucrats, not the athletes.
So I want to be respectful of your time. So do you have time for one more question? Or
Yeah, I've got 15 more minutes. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So combat sports has just, taken the world by storm. UFC specifically, obviously boxing, everybody's excited that Turkey and Dana White are going to start promoting boxing. Do you foresee the enhanced games ever including combat sports?
Yeah. So why is it that UFC succeeded so much? And, I know Rorion Gracie, I know the Fertitas, I've hung out with all of these people. And it was because boxing is so dysfunctional. You have all these different federations, all these different weight categories. It's unclear who the best boxer in the world is. Right. And UFC came along with a simple premise. It's in their name. Who is the ultimate fighter? Weight classes don't matter. Fighting styles don't matter. Rorion Gracie, when they started UFC, did not have any drug testing. And so it was the only question, who is the ultimate fighter? And it became one unified structure, one unified financial system. And this led to a much better outcome for athletes and for fans. And so we're deeply inspired by what UFC has achieved, and we have a similar trajectory. And we do see the potential of combat sports being included, because combat sports are low infrastructure. They have high television and social media impact. But the one thing is that they are not objectively measurable. And so that's why we decided not to include them in the first game, sure. But we will most likely include them in future instantiations.
So do you envision enhanced games creating entirely new sports or kind of hybrids by any chance?
We have been approached by a great many people who have very innovative new sports. And because we have such a compelling business model that underpins our delivery, we can incubate new sports. And so I think of the organization that has the closest structural parallel to us is Red Bull. So Red Bull uses sports to sell, at the time, a banned or illegal energy drink. It was illegal in France until 2003. And in the same way, we use sports to market performance enhancements. And unlike Red Bull, we have an opportunity to drive new innovation in products and build a whole suite of enhancement products. But also, we can have quite a variety of sports. So Red Bull, can do Felix Baumgartner jumping from space, right? That wasn't considered it's an athletic achievement. Is it a sport? Right. Is flying underneath the Golden Gate Bridge in a fighter jet sport, or is an athletic achievement? But it is interesting and dynamic media content. And we see a world in which we have the potential to own an entirely new parallel sports ecosystem built around human enhancement.
So we talked about the Olympics, a lot here. Will the enhanced games compete internationally? Will people represent their nations, or is this just a totally different format?
I think that this is more like tennis than it is like the Olympics. So in the Olympics, it's Team USA in big letters, versus in tennis, it's like Novak Djokovic of Serbia, small flag. And so it's still a point of pride to represent your nation.
Sure.
But I also recognize that the era of nationalism is over. The power of social media has created the opportunity for different kinds of individuals to coalesce and build communities that transcend national and geographic borders. Here in Midtown Manhattan, if you wore an American flag T-shirt, that would be very problematic. In Idaho, it's probably something that is to be celebrated. And I think in the era of social media, when communities can coalesce online in ways that defy geographies, the idea of political nationalism has declining relevance in our modern world. And so the Olympics can be the guardians of political sport. And they're very good about that. We are the guardians of scientific sport. And it's something completely different.
So last question here for you. And this is just for my own, I guess, personal curiosity. You seem very open to many different, I guess, I don't know, call them pharmaceutical, scientific, life-enhancing, performance-enhancing drugs, call them what you want. What are your own personal opinions on peptides?
I think peptides have gained a lot of prominence because they are in this legal gray zone. And ultimately, the compounds that work are synthetic testosterone, anabolic steroids, and EPO. And the toxicology and the drug-on-drug interactions have been well proven out. And that I think that there's this explosion of peptides because of a lack of regulatory scrutiny. And they sit in this gray zone, sometimes classified as dietary supplements. Some countries where they're more legal than others. And I don't think it's easy to make a blanket assessment because the category is so broad.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm going to end it here because I got to be a man of my word. So I will edit this, and like any pauses, we'll kind of take out anything. I always try to make my guests look as well as I can. Interesting fact is, we're actually coming to New York City, Manhattan, the end of September for a vacation. I've been there a couple times. I love it there. So we'll be.
Great. Well, when you're here, come drop into the office and say hello and meet the team. And
okay.
It'd be a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We're at 60 Madison on right on Madison Square Park in the middle of Manhattan.
Oh, okay. We're staying at the Beekman Tower across from the UN.
Oh, okay. Yeah, in Beekman Place. Yeah. You could walk here.
Okay.
About 12 or 15 minutes. Well, yeah. Just email my team. We'll be a pleasure to meet you here when you're in New York and welcome you and show you around.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
So I got to do my intro if that's okay, real quick.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And then so Dr. and it's D'Souza.
D'Souza, yes.
D'Souza, founder. Okay. Gosh, yeah, I have a lot more questions, but like I said, I want to stick to my word here. All right.